What's popping, y'all? So today we're gonna be talking about a cheater, a scammer, as well as a disgusting manipulator. And no, I'm not talking about George Santos, but I'm glad his downfall is coming soon. Obviously, if you look at the thumbnail today, we're talking about Paolo Macchiarini's basically his crime against humanity, as well as him being a subject of bad surgeon. So this will be like a reaction slash review of it as I go more in detail about certain things. So if you don't know who Macchiarini is, basically he is the surgeon that was charged with gross negligence as well as assault to many of his patients throughout the 2010s for using an experimental treatment called a synthetic trachea transplant. He was, quote unquote, developing a way where you can create a synthetic trachea out of like 3D printing and coat the trachea into like stem cells and the patient's own stem cells. And so it can make it easier for the patient to not reject the trachea, as well as making sure that it creates a perfect fit into the body. Paulo attempted the first synthetic organ transplant or trachea surgery back in 2011, and it received a lot of rave because not only was this a rare surgery, but now it kind of showed up the potential. Like, now that we have 3D printing, now that we have a lot of this technology, we have a lot of means of saving lives. And I really highlight how difficult this surgery is, just using like an actual trachea. It's something you don't just create in a 3D printer or lab. The first ever tracheal transplant surgery ever done in human was done 2 years ago, 10 years after Paulo tried to attempt all of this. And so this is just really highlighting like how big of a deal Paulo's, invention, quote unquote, was at the time. And another reason why this is a big deal is that it just goes into the field of regenerative medicine. Now, regenerative medicine is the field of, and so like I keep saying at the time, this was such a big deal to the point where it's just like people were on him. ABC wanted to do a report about him, everybody wanted to really hop onto this because, this is such a big deal. Like, this will really change the game and how we do medicine, how we do organ transplants potentially. But obviously the reason why we're here 13 years later is that he made a lot of this stuff up, as well as has participated in so much gross misconduct to the point where it's just, it's not only unethical, but it's very much immoral. And so in a 39-page report released by the Karolinski Institute, the institute that had him like hired at the time to do these surgeries, they basically commissioned an investigator to look into his clinical procedures as well as his data, and they found that out of the 6 published papers authored by Macchiarini, they all had misrepresented data from recipients of the artificial windpipes or tracheas. The investigation also found that 2 of the papers described operations that had not received necessary ethical approval, and that a 7th paper, also authored by Macchiarini, reporting transplantation of artificial esophagi into rats, had misrepresented results as well. The big reason why the documentary really, one of the things they really pushed on is that you need to test, your findings into rats first before you test it into humans, because it's just like, those are the closest things to like ethical, test subjects we can have, instead of just putting on a live human being. You wouldn't just want to put no random drug in a human being to see how it goes. Like that in the olden days, you want to test it in rats first, or pigs, or some type of, animal, to make sure that your treatment, your invention, or whatever is ethically sound before we put it into humans and unalive a bunch of people. Now, going more to the papers under investigation relate to just 3 of the patients that were, experienced some of Macchiarini's, experimentation, as well as a report that said that the synthetic tracheas had signs that they were successfully integrated, like they had no issues, being able to adapt to the host body. But unfortunately, as we now know, 2 of those transplant recipients have been unalived, and 1 spent time in an intensive care unit after the procedure. Macchiarini has previously said, throughout the years, that it's something else. Keep in mind, a lot of these people, as I'll go more later into depth about their backgrounds, a lot of them were cancer patients. A lot of them had, were in car accidents. A lot of them, already had damage to the trachea, had some underlying condition. And for a time, whenever people try to really like, hey, we need to look at your stuff, we need to look at your reports and stuff, he will always say like, oh, it was because of cancer. It was like they already had, conditions. They were already broken. There's not much I could have done. It was more like an emergency situation where I had to help out, but it wasn't like a guarantee. But hey, my research still good, And so going down the report, basically Garden, the investigator, he basically compared the medical records to what was in the publications and the report. And in many instances, the publication claimed improvement in patients even though there was no evidence of an examination. This is very much a big part of the documentary, as I said, because there were a few patients, especially Chris I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Basically, his family said, like, Macchiarini didn't even, like, do a lot of follow-up. Like, another family said the same thing. Macchiarini didn't really, like, keep in touch to look at her treatment because, he was quote unquote out saving other people. He was globetrotting. He was trying to get his fame, success, and all that. And right there is a red flag for a lot of patients, because at the end of the day, your doctor, no matter what stage that they are in your treatment plan, they have to do follow-up. Like, that is, not only just in regulations and rules in terms of the American healthcare system, but also that's more of like a moral, Hippocratic oath, sentiment of a doctor to make sure your patients really successfully, succeeded with the treatments. Like, they have to follow up, and for him not to follow up is a big red flag as to like what he was trying to do, because he probably already knew that his stuff was not tested in animals, but he just wanted to like say, oh, I did this, and just wash his hand, cleans, and dip out, and this is one of the biggest red flags, caught into the report. And basically, there's a lot of other stuff in the report that, wasn't covered by a Nature article in that short little page. And I don't have access to the actual report or the rat model test and all that. But I really just want to go down the list of victims that, Paolo left in his wake. Ademirium, basically, he was a man from Eritrea who was earning master's degrees in Iceland when he was diagnosed with cancer. Basically, he was able to get the cancer knocked out, but his, trachea was obstructed in 2011. Basically, this is the guy that this article is about. He unalived a year later despite undergoing many treatments at, the Karolinski Institute. The autopsy showed that Bean had a chronic lung infection, a clot in his lung, and the synthetic trachea had come loose. Another victim, Christopher Lyles, basically he was covered extensively in the documentary. Like, he had a daughter, he was literally like, a wholesome man who got diagnosed with tracheal cancer, which was treated with radiation and surgery. He heard about Bean's treatment and through his doctor asked Macchiarini to do the same for him. Macchiarini obliged and created a fully synthetic trachea seeded with stem cells from Lyles and implanted it at KI in November 2011, the same year. Lyles died suddenly in 2012 after he had returned home, but no autopsy was performed. But one can assume that this was due by the trachea, as much as, you can see all the victims right here. So next case that is really much very important to this whole saga is Yulia Tulik. Basically, in 2012, Macchiarini implanted a fully synthetic trachea seated, in Yulia at Cuban State Medical University. Tulik had a tracheostomy, ectomy, or how you want to say it, resulting from a car accident. Basically, they created a hole in her throat for her to breathe effectively as her trachea was damaged. But other than that, her life was not in danger. Now, this was very much a big deal because a lot of people didn't realize he also operated in Russia at the time he was operating in Sweden. But basically, the Science for Life Extension Foundation basically helped secure a $2.6 million mega grant from the Russian government aimed at luring foreign talent and additional funding for that medical school where he performed this surgery. And the thing about this is that you need to have some type of substantial data before you even can, do this. And if you haven't really tested your stuff on rats or on animals and stuff, or you have really falsified data, then at the end of the day, this is a big deal, because now you're just giving out money to anybody. And I get that a lot of people might say, like, well, he might have tricked them, he might do this. Like, if you're a rigorous institute, you would know the tit for tat, and you would know how to really discertain what is going on with a patient or like with a surgeon who obviously faking y'all out. But keep going with Yulia's case. Basically, it was also featured in another documentary, Experimenting, basically a 3-part documentary that was broadcast in 2016 that started to unravel, Paolo's big image. And so it not only showcased the Yulia case, but also a few other cases that, 2 other patients had passed away from, but also the 4th case, there was, the only survivor in Paolo's wake that had his transplant removed. And after this documentary came out, the audit was done by the Federal Service of Supervision of Healthcare of the Krasnodar hospital revealed that he had operated in Russia without a Russian medical license and had no filed documentation about materials in an artificial windpipe with the state register. Basically, they had no documentation about this procedure or his invention, all that. And basically, the hospital was ordered to correct those violations, but no sanctions were imposed. So pretty much, you not only just let this man just skate through, but also you're letting the hospital skate through for not doing their due diligence. Basically, recently in 2023, he was basically sentenced, for his gross negligence with the 3 patients that the report, in Sweden finalized on. And so just going down this, story, he was found guilty of gross assault against 3 of his patients today and sentenced to about 2 years and 6 months. This is in June 2023, a few months ago. Ruling comes a year after a Swedish district court found Macchiarini guilty of bodily harm in 2 of the cases and gave him a suspended sentence. This all stems from Macchiarini's performed experimental surgeries on 3 patients at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. Basically, all 3 patients had passed away when the implants failed. 1 patient, unalived suddenly when the implant caused massive bleeding just 4 months after it was implanted. The 2 others survived for 2.5 and nearly 5 years respectively, but suffered painful and debilitating complications before their unalivings. What is significant about this appeal process, basically the judges disagreed with the court's decision that or the first court's decision that you basically gave them a suspended sentence, that the first 2 patients that were treated were under emergency conditions. Basically, they were saying that, hey, they could have still been alive a lot longer without these, surgeries, even if they had any other type of debilitating condition. And this, surgery was the direct cause of their unaliving. And so he's negligently at fault. Judges ruled that Macchiarini had acted with criminal intent, even though he hoped the technique would work. They were persuaded by the evidence that he was fully aware of the risk that the procedure would cause the patient's physical injuries and suffering, and that he was indifferent in the realizations of these risks. And as last reported, Macchiarini is likely to serve 2/3 of his sentence in line with Swedish standards, and hopefully more can come from the cases in Russia, as well as other regulations that are sent of course through all of this, this whole trial. So the big thing I want to hit home with this whole video is that this is a big case for a lot of reasons. Like, this not only makes it harder to try and get science proven, get science moving forward, because like I said, this was supposed to be this groundbreaking, this great treatment that was going to benefit the lives of a lot of people, and now you having a person who just wanted personal gain, basically trying to profit off of this, and now we're calling in question a lot of his work. By the end of the day, people were really jumping on this because this was seen as a big deal, like it was going to save a lot of people's lives. And now people are too afraid to really just go back into this field because now it's tainted by the name of Paolo Macchiarini. Not only that, it really damages the mistrust that the science community has with basically the general public, because like we seen with the pandemic, mistrust between not only the government but also with the scientific community is at a all-time high, not only because of political disinformation, like politicians are really just trying to skew science and facts and data and all that, and to try and push their personal agendas and not really just keeping it truthful. But it's just medical professionals, public health professionals I've seen in my field, they really don't know how to bridge that gap, and they don't. Some of them don't want to bridge that gap because it's more like the ivory tower type of mentality of, hey, I know better, I know more than you. You should listen to me, and not really trying to bridge communications with the community. And so that is one of the biggest things, like, that has biggest implications on this whole, Paolo case, because now it's going to make it harder for people to really trust their doctors when they say, hey, I can help you. And now you have an individual that out here trying to get money, fame, whatever, not really giving to, cares about their patients. And now, ruins it for the rest of us. And so that being said, that has been my little reaction review to Bad Surgeon, the Paolo Macchiarini story. I don't know what it's called, but basically I'm probably gonna go watch it on Netflix, because at the end of the day, this is not really supposed to supplement it. This is supposed to be more of like a deep rundown, as well as like a big, picture of like what it's about. So, but I definitely tell y'all, go watch it, go please, support it. As though if you like what you see today, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, all that one for good stuff, a lot of good content coming out. Even with the new year coming up soon, but keep rocking with me, I keep rocking with y'all. If you want to see more of my content, some of my other reactions, here, some right here. I definitely put y'all go watch that. But stay warm, stay frosty, depending on what part of the country you're in, and peace out.